Good evening and welcome to Hello It's Us, a program dedicated to the premise that life in general goes better if it's all us pulling in one direction, as opposed to you, me, and them pulling opposite ways. Hello It's Us is brought to you through a collaboration between Uptown Bills, the Extended Dream Foundation, and all the folks here at Public Access Television Channel 18. I'm Terry Cunningham, one of your co-hosts. My partner Keith Ruff down at the end.
I did.
Again, we've got friends from the university here. Tiffany Stevenson Earl, Mark Harris, and Jan Gorman. And we will continue talking a little more in depth about each of their areas. Who wants to start?
One question I have. With all the laws, did you foresee any major problems in the future?
With all the laws, do we see any?
With the advent of ADA, will there be major problems on the campus in many ways? Or is it a law that's gonna fit like a glove?
Well, I think there were predictions when the ADA Amendments Act passed that there would be a huge influx of students with disabilities who would arrive on campus. And at least at Iowa, that didn't happen because what the Amendments Act asked us to do or required us to do, we were already doing.
Okay.
That we never looked at limiting our discussions to categorical definitions of disability, but rather what's the functional impact on the student's learning. And because we did that, and we never required a diagnosis of any kind to work with a student who has a disability. So when you think of it, there are some students, like with chronic health issues, that struggle 7 or 8 years to get an accurate diagnosis of what's going on, but all that time they're still suffering the impact of it. And so the predicted surge in enrollment for our office never occurred. I think we were actually serving those students anyway.
And at least I think for our office with the passage of the ADA Amendments Act, I think what we foresaw was more complaints. But I don't think that's the case. I think we haven't seen an increase. I wouldn't say a huge increase. If we were to look at over the past several years, what's been the main protected class complaint that has been filed, I would say it has been disability related. Now, does that mean that discrimination or harassment is taking place? That's what an investigation is used to determine. But not a huge influx of complaints like we thought we would see. So.
That's what I meant.
Okay.
Little things like that. They all end up.
But I would say that still, at least from the at the university, that probably is still the #1 related area when we talk about complaints, disability-related complaints that we see versus any other protected classification.
So since we're talking about the Amendments Act, we have seen an increase in services to numbers of individuals. But that was expected. That didn't surprise us. What does surprise us is actually in 1995 when the Family Medical Leave Act was approved. We didn't see this initially, but particularly over the last 10 years or so, we've seen such an influx in that employees are working with their disability in a different way than what I believe the Americans with Disabilities Act actually intended. And what happens is people are absent from work instead of, and so when their health is causing them some concern, they'll take absence from work, which is absolutely fine. In the past, we would have seen, what can I do? What kind of accommodations might be feasible? And so they have another avenue to use, and that's okay. What then happens, though, is it detracts from the idea of being able to be at work with accommodations. So that was surprising, I think, to a lot of us, and we've just observed this over the years.
have any of these employers played with flex time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We use a lot of flex time at the university and actually have been for a long time. Lots of our employees use flex time even without health conditions. They're just using flex time. We do a
Okay.
lot of telecommuting, a lot of telecommuting.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of jobs will allow telecommuting, but some jobs will not, you know, and or maybe it's a portion thereof. But that's been very, very helpful. Both of those have been very helpful. We actually have in our family support services for the university, we have very concrete, laid out programs for flex time and telecommuting that people can easily get information about. So that's really a positive thing, I think.
What are the most common accommodations asked for? Or is there a group that are most common?
You want to start first?
Yeah, I'll start from the student end of it. The most common accommodation is extended time for exams, tests, or quizzes.
Yeah.
Generally, it's 50% to 100% additional time for a student who may process information more slowly or may have difficulty in terms of fine motor movement to write an exam. We also have a number of students who use scribes that they'll say the answer to the exam and then someone else will mark it into the test booklet or the Scantron sheet for them. The second most accommodation we have is electronic copies of textbooks, and that's kind of the equivalent of books on tape, but it's better than that. All students at the University of Iowa, staff and faculty, get a free program if they'd like from IT Services called Read and Write Gold. And Read and Write Gold is an academic effectiveness suite of tools, including text-to-speech conversion. So the students who have difficulty reading can have their textbooks read to them. And as it's read to them, the program follows the words in what essentially a word format. And then if they have a word that they don't understand, they can stop it at any point, click on the word, it'll bring up a definition of the word and a picture of that. And it's also been very helpful for our international students to use that program. So I would say media services is the second most common, and then note takers in class. We have a lot of students, because of their disability, can either listen in class, take notes, but if they try to do both at the same time, they don't do either very well. And so we want to take that burden from them, knowing that they'll get a set of notes either from a classmate or from the instructor or from a teaching assistant, allows them to relax and just listen and engage with the instructor and try to pay attention to what's actually being taught, as opposed to attempting to act like a court stenographer, getting down every word and not really even processing what it is that's being spoken about in the lecture. So those would be the most common ones. For chronic health issues, we can work with the instructors around absences that are related to the disability and try to come up with a reasonable compromise that if a student's condition exacerbates and they need to miss class for a while, to enter a process of negotiation in terms of how is that work going to be made up. And then of course we do sign language interpreting and real-time captioning for our students that are deaf and hard of hearing.
Quite a plethora.
Great.
So, Terry, you had mentioned in our last segment, that, the ADA is all about individualization, and it's true, it really is. And so, we kind of look at accommodations as having a core, right? But from that core, then they take on a life of their own. They all look a little different. There's a little twinge to them on each and every one, because each setting is a little different. Somebody's health condition affects them a little bit differently than somebody else with the same exact health condition. But where they, because of the health condition, and maybe then in combination with what it is that they do in their job, their needs are a little bit different. Some accommodations that we provide, Keith, we were talking about flex scheduling and telecommuting. There's some of that that's happening for folks. There's also maybe some additional breaks throughout the day to help manage fatigue and stamina. There might be I always think of accommodations by health conditions. So I think of maybe like someone with diabetes who has need for regular food intake, and we allow more breaks, or food where maybe we don't normally allow food, you know, or we look at, there are a couple people who literally do take naps during the day and then work an extended shift, you know. We also have situations where we do software on computers for not so much read and write gold, because that's historically been primarily for students. We're looking at seeing about moving that into the faculty staff arena. But we use Dragon Dictate, we use voice recognition and speech to text, as well as then text to speech. We also use, I don't know, a lot of changes to office spaces, which, and not the desk part, that's not what I mean, but maybe it's the lighting in an area that needs to be changed, or maybe it's because of an allergic reaction we need to make a change to something within their environment. There's a plethora. I mean, you know, I can keep going. How far do you want to go?
Well, and you guys are in kind of a unique position in that you're providing accommodations for both students and employees,
Yes,
which, you know, are two very different breeds of cats.
yes, very
Yeah.
much.
For employees, because this was one of the early on questions, do you have an average cost to make an accommodation?
Yes, I don't like to use that average because there have been some expenses that we're talking $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. But and then that'll be a one-time shot, and the majority of the accommodations that are provided are truly less than about $400. They truly are. The expensive one-time shot is something very unique to the workplace that needs to occur, you know? And it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it does, and so that's what happens. You know, we make it happen.
Yeah.
So.
But that was another one of those things when it first
Oh,
happened.
yeah.
That, oh,
Yeah.
Right.
because
Yeah.
thousands of dollars a
Yes.
person, you know, instead of $6 to get 4 blocks to raise a
Right.
desk 4 inches off the
Right.
floor.
So,
You know, or-
and a lot, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
But
the most of them have turned out through the years to be very simple,
Right.
yeah,
very inexpensive ones.
And they get simpler all the time.
yeah.
Or there's those that don't
Yeah.
cost anything.
Yeah.
Right, and I was just thinking, so learning disabilities are very common, and are typically those types of disabilities that were not diagnosed during grammar school or secondary school, and but regardless, they're getting in. You know, folks are into the workplace and they're having difficulty learning, maybe with memory retention, and then we have health issues related to age that also can affect memory and retention. Those types of accommodations rarely cost a dime. You know, we modify how we teach a job, we modify how a job might be done, just basic things to allow someone to be able to retain information more easily. Technology has just been super, you know, in looking at, well, what we can do today versus what we could do 5 years ago. It's just incredible, very exciting.
Really, I think, Terry, the attitude of course came up before people realized why not ask the individual what they really need.
Right,
Right.
you're absolutely right.
Instead of going out and buying something really expensive.
Yeah.
Well, and
You're
then,
absolutely right.
I mean, the person asking for the accommodation, it would be helpful if they had an
Yeah.
idea up front. You know,
Yeah.
this is what I need, and not
I
go
agree.
through
Yeah,
the other thing. But one of the other things that technology has brought a major change to is so many products now everybody uses.
Yes.
You don't have to go to a disability products catalog or a durable medical equipment place because everybody uses those talking pen things or
Aren't those
you know,
smart
the
pens?
Yeah.
cell phones that
Yeah.
do more things than I'm ever going to figure out that they do, but help folks that have an issue, but everybody has it. And, you know, the convenience that makes, the fact that, you know, a lot of the equipment does have voice recognition with it.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about not having the manual dexterity. And, you know, so much also just has to do, as you mentioned, with having somebody look at a problem from a different way.
Yes.
And so often, you know, the answer is right there. As you said, it might be turning a table this way or angling a light that way. That until somebody raises the issue would never be looked at as a problem. But, you know, if you're the person trying to get around or get under the desk, it's a major issue, especially if you're somebody as tall as I am, that you pull up to a desk or a table and your knees are that far
Yeah.
over the top of the table.
Now I'm a beneficiary of some technology. My building is under lockup. So in other words, I can't unlock the door. So somebody mentioned a remote. And the remote doesn't open the door,
Oh.
but it does open the lock. And I can get in.
I think you raised a good point earlier that, when a student or an employee makes a request, what happens then is there's a collaborative, interactive process that follows to try to solve whatever the challenge or the problem is. And so it isn't one size fits all.
Right.
It's inviting the expertise of maybe one of us, the expertise of the employer, the expertise of the staff member to all kind of sit down together and say, what can we do to
And frequently,
Comments.
yeah, in employment situations, we frequently are interacting directly with the health provider to gain some insight as to, well, this type of health condition and the way that this person is experiencing this, and now let us tell you a little bit more about what the work is like. You know, and the health provider is very helpful. We've also found that asking for something makes people feel very vulnerable. You know? So if I have to go and ask my supervisor for something, all right, if you go and ask for a better performance evaluation or a raise, are you not somewhat vulnerable? Well, now you're going and you're talking to them about, hey, I'm having this problem with doing this part, you know, this part of the job, or getting into this particular area, or whatever it might be. That's difficult. That's owning up to, hey, I'm having problems, and you already have a power differential employer-employee situation, and so it just has the potential to make it more dramatic for folks. And so we do stress this interactive. It's not always about the employer and the employee. There are other people that can add to it. And then, Terry, you mentioned, and I think you're so right, there frequently we do not see, actually the majority of the time, we do not see that an employee knows what might be helpful. I mean, they're not, necessarily aware, as well as they don't know what the employer can do. You know, and so it's kind of nice to have these conversations where people are able to come together and say, here's some options, here are the ways some things can be done. You know?
And I'm still of the feeling that whether it's the employee or the student, I encourage them to be upfront
Yes.
from the very beginning.
Yeah. But no, you're very right that a lot of folks don't know what they don't know. And depending on where they grew up, where they went to school at.
Yeah.
There's a possibility, you know, they represented the disability population in their school district. And
Unfortunately,
the knowledge base in the school district as a result was probably minimal, so that there wasn't a person in the district who, if they said, you know, I'm really having an issue with
right.
such and such,
Yeah.
could go, well, here, this is what, you know, and is more likely to get the, well, you go ahead and try and let me do some checking, and, you know, before you know it, they've graduated and still don't know what they don't know.
Right.
One advantage we do here have in Iowa is the Iowa Center for Assistive Technology Education and
Yeah.
Research right here on our campus. And every college of education student that goes forward to teach has had at least 1 or 2 exposures to assistive technology and has had to actually master a particular type of assistive technology. They work in groups, they give presentations. And I think what we're beginning to see is that as those students go out into the 99 counties to teach, there's at least one person in every school, or we're getting there, that's not anxious about the idea of thinking about assistive technology, who feels comfortable maybe taking the lead within their school to figure out what might help a student.
And Mark, there's many more kids out there. They're willing to say, yes, I have a disability. Instead of hiding it.
And I know I'm not the interviewer, but I was just thinking about what you just said, Keith. It makes you ask the question, for Mark and Jen, do you see it differently between employees as with a student, where an employee may not feel as comfortable coming forward with a disability and making a request for an accommodation, whereas a student may, or vice versa?
I don't know. I think we work a lot with a lot of employees and applicants who do ask the question of us, should I tell them? You know, and our response is always, well, that's really up to you. And particularly for non-visible disabilities, where my encouragement of individuals is to think about, do they believe that they know enough about the job that they can make a decision as to whether they're going to be able to do all the functions of the job without need, without accommodation? And if that's so, then I think it's really up to them as to whether they disclose or not. And for a lot of people, then they choose not to. Going back to Keith, what you were saying, it would be better if they would disclose. That's also true, because then sometimes maybe their health doesn't allow them, maybe it impacts their thinking about how it impacts their job, if that works, if that is understandable. And so then they don't realize that their job is being affected. And then performance maybe becomes a concern. So you said something, I think, in the last segment that, you know, just being open and transparent about things, it is very helpful. They need to have good relationships with their employers. It is truly crucial. It's really crucial to have that, so that they feel comfortable to disclose.
But there's an awful lot of folks out there who have been told not to do that.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
and whereas it's not going to make much difference if Keith and I go in an office and declare that we have a disability. Folks have pretty much figured that out. But yeah, for the people who have an invisible disability, and it just, you know, is so much easier to establish that from the beginning.
It is. And the number of people with disabilities at the university that we're aware of, and we're not aware of all the individuals. It's amazing, and I think, you know, it's very confidential information, but I am very impressed with what people do and how they do it, and self-accommodations and the creativity folks have that they bring to the table, and figuring out how to manage things themselves, and then when they have a need, that they feel okay and asking for some help. So that's exciting. But in students, is it different?
Yeah, and some of it I think may be because our traditional college-age student has, you know, and this always surprised me when I look at their birth dates. You know, the entering freshman class, the ADA was already established before they were born.
Yeah.
And so I think there could be an age-related
Yeah.
factor as well, is that our students in general have no problem at all identifying as a student with a disability and asking for accommodations. Now, interestingly enough, the one population which that is not true are student veterans who are returning from Afghanistan or
They're
Iraq.
not disclosing?
They are not disclosing, and we're working very hard with the Veterans Advisor here to try to bridge the gap, because and I think part of the military service is, I can do it, I don't need help, I'm not different than anybody else, it's the unit, it's all of this. And so asking for help from that population has been a real challenge.
Which is very unfortunate because of all the services that
Yeah.
are available to them. And Iowa is known as, didn't we get some recognition?
We do. Yeah, we are recognized as a veteran-friendly institution. And there's only a small percentage of colleges and universities that earn that rating.
Yeah.
I think that can be a problem with older people who are disabled. Because when we were younger, we were encouraged to be independent as possible, and not to ask for help. And now I'm beginning to see, yes, if I do need help, there's nothing wrong in
Right.
asking.
Right.
Yeah.
That is hard to adjust to.
Yes,
And I think that, and another thing Keith and I have talked about a lot, is depending on whether a person had a disability from birth on,
yeah.
Right.
or whether somebody acquired a disability
Right.
later in life.
Right.
Broke my neck in a car accident in April of my senior year in high school. Had been an athlete, had done all kinds of stuff. Asking for help was not in my top 30 easy things to do. So you go from being up and running around and doing whatever to essentially having to learn how to do everything over again. And it's still difficult to ask for help in some places.
And the things you learn now are in a different context.
But yeah, and from back in the days where you had very little say into
Yeah.
what control you had of the whole healthcare system, and you know, you were lucky to get on the back of the bus. You certainly weren't going to get close to the driver's seat back then. But you know, those things have changed too, and a lot of it is because of the opportunities of people with disabilities to get together and talk, and that and the lack of is one of the biggest problems that I think folks with disabilities have, is that we know there's a whole bunch of us out there, but we're rascally little critters to try to scoot together and get to talk about, which is why we don't do well at dealing with major issues, because we don't get together and talk and agree, okay, these are the top 10 issues we all have, they're just in different order. And I've been saying for 40 plus years, let's just throw them in a hat and pull one out each year, and everybody work on it, and in 10 years we'll be done. But you know, you can get people to agree to that in a group meeting, but you know, they haven't cleared the doorway yet before they're trying to figure out how they're going to get their number one issue done.
It is, I think you're right, it's difficult to establish that somebody else's number one agenda item should be your priority. We have a group at the University of Iowa called the Council on Disability Awareness, and I think both of you are aware of it and have been members of it over the years. And Mark and Tiffany and I are also on it, and a number of other individuals. And one of the struggles of that group is that, as with all volunteer organizations, you know, there's an ebb and flow of membership, you know, so sometimes it's really a small membership, and then over a year or two, it'll really build up, and we'll have a great representation. But that group is actually, going back to our first segment, we were talking about, well, how did we first get started in this anyways? The Council on Disability Awareness actually encouraged the University of Iowa administration to develop this position that I originally entered into. And so it was through their advocacy and their awareness of what the needs were on campus that helped bring it to the forefront for the administration. And I think that those types of conversations need to continue to occur, you know, by a number of people, and it would be great if more individuals would participate in that council. Will you take any marketing for the council? Can I say anything about?
Sure.
Okay, so they meet on the third Thursday of each month at noon, except for a break over the holidays in December, as well as then in July. So it's 10 months out of the year.
Well, we've blown through this time period too. So we'll end here, talk and see whether we're going to bring folks a third episode or not. Thank you guys all for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks
for having us.
out there.
Thank you very much.
See you next week.
Have a good week out there.